welcome back to Truck Tech, everyone. This week we've got something a little different for you. We spent a lot of time on this show talking about autonomy, truck autonomy. We talk about electrification, infrastructure, regulation, lots of things like that. Today we're going to take a little different look, and we're going to talk about safety, and we're going to talk about artificial intelligence. And our guest today is Stefan Hecht. He is the CEO and founder of NATO, which is a company that uses AI to help drivers do a better job behind the wheel. And what we're going to talk to him about, we'll get to in just a moment, just as soon as we cover a few headlines. Hyzon Motors has a new chairman of the board. Eric Anderson is taking over on Thursday, replacing George Gu, who resigned from the position. Anderson was a Hyzon board member for the last couple of years as founder and CEO of West River Group. He was responsible for 4 different special purpose acquisition companies, all under the name Decarbonization Plus. In fact, Hyzon was the first company that Decarbonization Plus brought public back in July of 2021. Plus is testing high autonomy trucks in Australia with toll road operator Transurban to see whether combining smart road infrastructure could help make trucking safer. Now, these trucks will have safety drivers on board, and in the US, Plus, as you know, focuses mostly on advanced driver assistance systems, what was called level 2 autonomy. Although it does offer several advances on that, some of the features of level 4. Its level 4 autonomy is running in the background. Interestingly, our scheduled guest next week is David Liu, the CEO of Plus, so we'll look forward to that. Finally, First Element Fuel Systems is marking 10 years in business this week. It's anniversary of hydrogen fueling stations. Now, you may not know much about First Element because their stations primarily are focused on passenger vehicles. There's a couple of those still in existence out there. But First Element is beginning to look into and work with Hyundai on the Exient in terms of fueling the fuel cell truck that Hyundai has now got operating up in the Port of Oakland area. First Element also recently received $27 million from the state of California to increase hydrogen production. Okay, let's welcome Stefan Hecht to the show. Stefan is the founder and CEO of NATO, as I mentioned. His background before founding the company in 2015 was in academia and industry consulting. He was a professor at the Precourt Institute for Energy at Stanford University, and before that, he was a senior partner at McKinsey, where he co-founded and led the clean tech and sustainability practice. Oh, and he has a PhD in neural networks. NATO itself is about now 8 years old. 4 years ago, it absorbed the employees of Newton Technologies, a company operating in the same AI safety space. NATO has financial backing from well-known investors like Greylock and the venture capital arms of General Motors, Stellantis, and Toyota. Stefan, welcome to Truck Tech.
Thanks for having me, Alan.
Yeah, great to see you. Nice shirt. Good color for the show. I like it. Yellow. Somebody said you had a yellow shirt on. I like that. Listen, we don't know each other very well. We did have an opportunity to talk a few weeks ago just to get acquainted, and I appreciated that because I hate to sort of bring someone on, just cold and not have any background. But we had an opportunity to look into a little bit of what you guys were doing, and these days it seems that AI is pretty much everywhere and in everything. So let's start with a definition of AI as it pertains to your company and sort of your value proposition, if you could.
Sure. The $6 million question of the day. Well, my definition of AI is it's a computational system that processes, a complex set of sensor inputs and data, and is able to extract and recognize patterns out of that to make decisions, classify. In our case, it's classification of risks. How risky is the current situation or the current driving moment, and then act on that. Sometimes, if it's an AI embedded in a robot, it might be actually taking action. Autonomous vehicles are a great example of that. In our case, the AI is really complementary to the human driver. So it is informing, warning, educating the human driver and keeping them safe from risks that they don't perceive.
Yeah, I think when we talked about bringing you on, I think two things were particularly kind of on my mind, and the first was a pretty stunning statistic that your folks provided on the cost of road crashes in the U.S. at 340 billion with a B every year, and that works out to like just over $1,000 for each of 328 million residents. So I guess that is all crashes, of course, and not just those involving trucks. The second thing was your work with Navistar to put your technology in international trucks. Let's talk about the distraction though, driving distraction as a factor in most of these crashes, and how NATO addresses that.
Yeah, I mean, as you just said, it is the top risk while driving. If you take nothing else away from the show today, it's to stop using your phone while driving. In the commercial fleets we work with about 800 fleets all across the country. Distraction is not only the number one cause of collisions, but it is also responsible for about 65% of all the damage. It's the leading cause of collisions, particularly the long distractions, where you are looking at your phone or a tablet device for longer than 6 seconds while driving at urban or highway speed. You'll have gone the length of a football field without looking at the road. That turns out to be 23 times more dangerous than just regular driving. Now, if there's pedestrians crossing or there's a traffic in front of you that's slowing down, you're talking about 2,000, 2,500 times more dangerous than regular driving. So you're really a better prey to your guardian angel in that kind of situation, or stop being distracted, your choice. Now, what we do, as already alluded to, is we detect that situation. We look out at the road and see if there's a threat emerging. Can be another vehicle, can be a pedestrian, can be a stop sign coming up, some kind of intersection. And we look at, is the driver paying attention? And if you're not in a dangerous situation, you're stopped at a red light or you're pulled over to the side of the curb. In that case, we won't bother you. We're not here. It's illegal in most states to handhold your phone at any point while you're in the vehicle, even if you're stopped. But we're not worried about that because while it may be illegal, it's not risky. We're concerned about the situation where you're driving around and there's other vehicles or bicyclists or pedestrians on the road, and you're in danger of running into them or running into a building. That's the moment where we give you feedback. If it's a high-risk situation but not an imminent collision, it's through voice. It'll say, pull over to use your phone or put your phone down. If it's an imminent collision, it's an all-out alarm, giving you a few precious seconds to either hit the brakes, swerve, take some kind of evasive action, and get you home safely at night.
So, did I just hear you say that NATO will basically know that I'm playing with my phone or using my phone, and will tell me to put it down? In other words, that feels very Big Brother to me. Am I off on that?
Yeah, it's our goal is to basically guide you and give you feedback in the situations where you don't realize you're taking the risk.
Okay.
When we do surveys of drivers, most drivers will admit, "Hey, I occasionally glance at my phone." If you ask them to estimate how often and how long, they'll typically say, "Oh, maybe once or twice a day, and for 1 or 2 seconds." The data shows for the 800 fleets that we've been working with, new drivers are looking at their phones 6 to 7 times per hour of driving. And they're looking at it for somewhere between 4 and 8 seconds on average. But there's quite a few drivers looking at their phone for 18, 20, 25 seconds. And so it's really building that awareness. It's one of the great things about Nauto is you don't realize how long you're looking at your phone. You don't realize how often you're doing it. So it's giving you that opportunity to self-correct. Yes, if your supervisor knew, if it was telling your boss that's what you're doing, then I do think it would feel creepy. In this case, our goal really is to inform the driver, give them a chance to change their behavior. And again, we're only doing that in situations where there's risk outside. If you're looking at your phone while standing in a parking lot or while stopped at a red light, we're not going to bother you. We're not here to be Big Brother. We're really here to warn you of situations where
Sure.
you're going to get hurt.
Yeah. So, that's interesting because, forward facing cameras have made believers out of drivers, mostly because what they record can exonerate them from blame in some crashes or, maybe not even crashes. But the drivers have been far less accepting of driver facing cameras. Fleets are increasingly
Yeah.
adopting them to save them from, nuclear verdicts. Your cameras face both forward and back and have external sensors designed to detect distracted and drowsy driving. Tell me how these work.
Yeah, it's really important to differentiate between the sensor, which uses computer vision or in a camera can take a picture, and what happens after that. Most of us associate a camera, like the old camcorders, right? If there's a camera, that means there's a video, that means there's a recording, that means somebody else is seeing it. And you typically associate that with the security cameras where, there's a guy behind a desk somewhere watching 25 monitors and watching what everybody's doing. That is not the correct analogy for what happens here. In our case, there is a Sony image sensor, but it's the AI processing that visual data in real time. And if there's nothing happening, the AI just processes it and says, there's low risk here, nothing dangerous is happening, move on. And the data never gets recorded, never gets captured. As it gets more dangerous, the AI will give the driver feedback. That's the alerts I was just talking about, where it'll either say, pull over to use your phone, or take a break if you're sleepy, or put on your seatbelt if you forgot to put on your seatbelt after the last, stop and drop off. And in those cases, again, the driver gets a chance to correct. If they correct, that's where it ends. We have the option to record video, and that can be initiated by the driver. If the driver is, threatened by somebody, for example, or cut off by somebody, to your point, they can tap a button and trigger that video recording to exonerate themselves. Typically, we do also capture the video if something really serious happens, like an actual collision, as you said, so that the
Yeah.
dispatcher knows, is this driver hurt or are they injured? But the distinction between the computer vision being able to see in real time what's happening and video recording is really important, because most of the traditional models, it's recording and somebody else is watching, and that's of course where it gets privacy intrusive.
Sure. I have a long history in safety communications when I worked at General Motors, and we used to talk about, ELDs, not ELDs, but the recording of crash data, and there was always a little bit of concern about, privacy and that sort of thing, but it recorded over itself. And it sounds like you're not really even one recording, and when you do, it doesn't last forever. Yeah, you told me, I think, that fleet managers and dispatchers don't automatically get a tattletale report on driver behavior. Are there exceptions to this?
Exceptions are what the fleet, and if it's a unionized fleet, we often have the drivers involved in designing the settings. What they determine are really the most serious events where you do want a video record. The obvious examples are the two I gave a moment ago, right? The drivers being attacked or threatened. For example, in passenger carrying fleets, it can be from the passenger. In truck fleets, obviously, it's more from the outside, somebody cutting them off or backing into them or running a red light, causing a dangerous situation. And then secondly, if there is a collision, because as you said at the beginning, you want that record to exonerate. We found that because the fleets we work with, the drivers get good really quickly, within a matter of days, with that gentle nudging of, hey, you shouldn't be looking at your phone. We see an 80% reduction in the serious risk behavior. And so just in a matter of a couple of days, you've taken your odds of collisions down to 1/10 of what it used to be. And so what remains is mostly collisions that are caused by other people. And so, as you
Mhm.
said, in those cases, you want the video to exonerate yourself. We have the option to capture video, for example, for new driver training or coaching. So that's a possibility, but many of our fleets don't use that and run with no video recording on, again, except for collision situations where somebody's getting hurt.
Sure. So, how successful would you say NATO has been in softening driver opposition to the, rear-facing camera? And it's a trust issue, right? I mean, how are you building that trust with the driver?
Yeah, by being very open and transparent about what's going on, by giving them a chance to try it. We do initial trial deployments with fleets. We recruit drivers and give them a chance to see both what happens in vehicle and where that data goes, and how it works. But really, drivers become believers when the system has saved their life. it may take a couple weeks for a driver driving around, but if they get that alert and they didn't realize, somebody else was running the red light, somebody else was cutting them off, there's a pedestrian stepping out behind a vehicle that they didn't see, the system alerts them, they hit the brakes or they swerve, and they go, "Oh my God!" Sometimes, of course, it's
Mhm.
4 letter words. But we look for that response. If you're surprised and then you smile or you wave, then we know we've done our job. And we look for those signals of gratitude when the driver feels, "Wow, this was appropriate. This really was dangerous, and it saved my life." We have a driver who fell asleep on the road. Was headed to rear end. He was in a giant tractor trailer. Was headed to rear end another Class 8 vehicle. We alerted him, and he was able to swerve. The vehicle still had a collision, but that driver is out there every day saying, "I would not be alive here today if Nato hadn't alerted me in time." And so our whole philosophy is very sparse. For a good driver, we may intervene 1 or 2 times a day, sometimes even for a great driver as infrequently as once a week. And you're not the only one on the road. There's lots of other people doing things, taking risks, making mistakes. So even a perfect driver can have a situation where they're at risk suddenly. And it's really all about building that trust of we're only going to alert you in those high risk moments and get you out of that sticky situation, get you home safely at night. That's where the trust is
Yeah.
built.
Okay, so you've talked. I think I read this. You didn't tell me this, but you've talked about AI being comparable to the effect that safety belts have had on driving safety. But your approach is different because it would avoid the accidents altogether, right? I mean, these are, you said 80% fewer in terms of incidents.
Yeah, up to 80. So seatbelts were our inspiration actually. When I started Nauto, we looked at what's historically been the biggest safety technology out there. And you go back over the decades, seatbelts were, first came out in the late 40s. They were started to be required in the 50s and 60s. And you see about a 20% reduction in serious injuries and fatalities over that decade when they first deployed. There's probably one other safety technology that had even bigger impact. Unfortunately, there's not good before and after data. The brake was invented in the very early 1900s, and I'm pretty sure that cars and trucks without brakes were not a good idea. So I'm pretty certain that had a bigger safety impact, but again, hard to find data from that long ago.
Yeah,
So when I founded Nauto,
I've
we
never
said,
thought
okay,
about
let's
that, but
beat
you're
the
right.
seatbelt.
Having no brakes is probably a pretty bad idea. So when
Personally, I,
you
I wouldn't get in a car without brakes. So
no,
it's
no, not if you knew it, right? So your website talks about reducing in-cabin and external risks in real time. Unpack that one, will you? What does that mean exactly? I presume this is the phone again and that sort of thing. But give me
so
a, for instance, if you haven't answered it.
Yeah, so external is there's a vehicle and stopping in front of you, and if you're still closing at a rate where you're going to hit that vehicle, we give you a heads up and an alert. Similarly, all of us have slightly different behavior when we stop as we come up on a stop sign. So we learn what's typical for drivers, and then if you're about to run a stop sign, you're not slowing down as you're coming up on it. We'll give you a stop sign ahead so you get a chance to slow down. So that would be the external risks. On the inside, it's what we talked about: either falling asleep or looking down at your phone, any kind of inattention that takes your eyes off the road. But again, we're only intervening in the situation where there actually is a danger out on the road. If you're looking down at your phone while you're stopped somewhere or you're in the middle of nowhere, there's nobody around you. We're not going to bother you in that situation. Doesn't mean it's legal, but it means it's low
Right.
risk.
Well, and it sounds like intrusiveness is what you're trying to avoid there. Let me switch over to your to your work with Navistar. How many fleets are now that use Navistar vehicles are now running NATO? You've mentioned 800, but I imagine that's sort of your total number of fleets, right?
Yeah, so we have 800 in total. A lot of those are light commercial vehicles. About 15% or so have heavy duty Class 8 vehicles as well. And Navistar is one of the top brands among those fleets. So we've got quite a few. I don't know the actual specific number of vehicles of Navistar trucks, but we cover about 3 billion miles every year. So you can imagine that's quite a lot of people driving a lot of miles.
again, that a percentage of that would be the Navistar. The reason I ask about that, of course, is that that's what we're here for. Is we
Sure.
write about and talk about the trucking fleets. What kind of early experience? I mean, this was I think 2022 when that deal was signed. But what kind of early experience have you seen there?
Well, I gave the example earlier. We've had a number of drivers who have become huge fans of the system. It really builds on top of your basic collision warning system that many new trucks now have, a Bendix or WAPCO system, for example, because those systems aren't aware of, did you already look at the risk, right? So they over alert you in situations where the driver is perfectly aware that, the lead vehicle is stopping and braking. But they also may not detect things like the driver falling asleep. And so the response has been very, very positive. The benefit of the partnership with Navistar is you can order your Navistar vehicle directly with an auto device pre-installed, or you can take
Oh
the
wow,
truck into any of the Navistar
yeah.
dealers around the country and have it retrofit. So both are options.
Well, and I have to believe that once you get one of the call them the big four, then the others are certainly paying attention. How does this set you up to win business from other OEMs? If you can talk about that.
I can't share details, but we're definitely in discussions with a number of other OEMs and also our fleet customers who have, other brands, right? PACCAR, Freightliner are pushing the other manufacturers to do the same and offer the same option.
So even you could retrofit this obviously to any of the major OEMs. Is that correct?
You can retrofit it to any truck. There's really no
Okay.
restrictions there. The advantage of Navistar is you can order your new truck with it already pre-installed, so then you don't have to mess with the installation at all.
Yeah, factory install is sort of the holy grail of companies like yours. I would think to have it done in the factory. I always ask a few business questions. You're privately held, so some of these, of course, are can't ask you. Well, I couldn't ask, but you couldn't answer, wouldn't answer. But I will ask you about sort of investment trends. I was on one of our shows on FreightWaves earlier this week, and there was an investor who was saying that asset light investment, which I would think what you do is asset light. Because it's it's a single unit and it's software based and AI based, that sort of thing. What do you think in terms of the attractiveness companies that don't need tens or hundreds of millions of dollars for engineering and manufacturing? Are companies like that, and I'll include you in that, are you better sort of candidates for investment right now, maybe, than some of these companies that just need all that money?
Yeah, the market definitely favors asset light or capital light companies. The most highly valued companies are pharmaceutical companies and software or SaaS companies where it's software as a service. Most of our business is actually SaaS. It's an analytics subscription. We charge per vehicle per year. In our case, we do have an add-on hardware module that, as we talked, either gets retrofit or gets installed by the OEM manufacturer. So we're almost no assets. It's not zero assets, but it's a couple $100 for the device, and that's definitely a huge advantage over somebody who's building autonomous vehicles or building EVs, where they have to have a
Sure.
factory and they're building very, very large assets.
Yeah. So, Stefan, I only have one more for you, and it's a question that I often wonder about, and that is how companies are named. I couldn't find an actual dictionary definition for NATO. Where did the name come from?
Yeah, it doesn't have a dictionary definition. It had two inspirations. When I started Nauto, I was playing around with this idea of how can vehicles learn from each other and drivers learn from each other. And so it was really around the idea of network and auto. But if you looked at AutoNet, NetAuto, those were all taken by dealers at that point in time. And so everything in that realm was taken. The contraction Nauto, I really hit upon because it's an ancient Greek word for navigation. You can still find it in words like astronaut or cosmonaut. The word nautical. Greeks, of course, got around by ship, so it has these marine connotations in the modern usage. But it really was just a way of getting around. So the idea is it's a tool to help you get around safely. And within it is this idea of every driver, every vehicle can learn from every other vehicle's experience. Because any risk, any danger, any collision we've seen, we feed back into the AI and algorithms to help other people avoid that same danger and that same risk.
Sure.
And so really, it's a little bit like Waze, right? Waze tries to help you avoid the traffic cops.
Yep.
Everybody adds updates on problems. We're looking for road dangers and driving risks and making sure something we've seen in one place never happens again.
Yep. I gotta cut you off there. Listen, this has been really fascinating. I hope the audience has enjoyed it. So, Stefan, thanks for being here today. Next week, folks, we will be back to autonomy, and our scheduled guest is David Liu, who is the CEO of Plus. And we look forward to having David on. I haven't talked to him in quite a while. Plus was in our headlines earlier in the show. And we will look forward to seeing you all then. Catch us on YouTube under the FreightWaves channel. Go to shows and then go to Truck Tech. Look forward to seeing you next time.